plaisir de lever dans la Chambre afin de parler sur cet enjeu important, tellement important pour les gens du Nouveau-Brunswick. New Brunswickers are feeling on the edge, insecure, adrift, even fearful, as President Trump seems intent on overturning the order of the world, letting things slide in all directions, as Leonard Coon famously sang. People are stuck on social media and the news cycles, trolling for the latest pronouncements from the White House in terms of how they might affect our lives here in New Brunswick and in Canada. Everyone is on tenterhooks, Madam Speaker. He's been, the President that is, offensive, disrespectful in his remarks about our recent past Prime Minister, threatening to crush our economy, to do harm for us, so we become a vassal state to the United States. And the tariffs are just one tactic. But they are an incredible source of stress. Think of the fishermen whose lobster catch from the Bay of Fundy to the Bay of Chaleur is primarily sold into the U.S. or China. China's already bringing in tomorrow tariffs on the lobster imports from Canada, and the United States is expected to bring in tariffs in 2 weeks, April 2nd, on just about everything here in Canada. So if you're a lobster fisherman, you're not only worried about yourself, your family, but your crew as well. That's a lot of New Brunswickers in our coastal communities, Madam Speaker, who are on the edge of their seats trying to understand what their near future is going to be, and how they can weather it, and what their long-term future is going to be. The same can be said for our potato farmers, many of whom, those who don't serve the French fry market, but export seed potatoes or table potatoes into the U.S. primarily, are in a similar state. Their primary product from their farms are potatoes. As over the years, we know, for good or for bad, farms have gotten bigger and increasingly specialized in one or two commodities. And in New Brunswick, potatoes are big. Up the river valley here, they're huge. And some of the potatoes themselves are huge, actually, come to think of it. I just was remembering visiting a potato farm some years ago, and the farmer offered me a giant bag of potatoes, and his potatoes were damn big. Anyway, that's an aside, but a personal recollection. So I guess my point about that, Madam Speaker, is many of us have friends or neighbors or relatives who farm or who fish or who have developed small and medium-sized businesses who take advantage significantly of the U.S. market. We think of small businesses as just serving the local market, but there's lots of small and medium-sized businesses because of the integrated nature of our economies between Canada and the U.S., because of our proximity to the U.S. border, because of the low Canadian dollar, have developed their businesses, their small businesses, their medium-sized businesses, really around serving that U.S. market. And so they too must be feeling really exposed and worried about their future, the future of their families, the future of their employees. They're not the kind of businesses that have factories or operations in other countries, but export from New Brunswick across the border into the U.S. So that's clearly a concern. Canadians working in the U.S. Or traveling there for work have become quite nervous, Madam Speaker, as news has come out recently about a Canadian who was simply trying to renew a young woman who was trying to renew her work visa in the U.S., and she was detained and ended up being put in prison basically for 2 weeks. So that's extraordinary, unprecedented times here in that context. So, Madam Speaker, it would be easier for everyone if the light were shone on exactly what we know. There's lots we don't know, and there's lots we don't know that we don't know, but what we know, and it would be helpful, and hopefully the Premier, some of her ministers address this, to share their analysis to date, about what sectors in particular are at greatest risk, and recognizing that, we can better debate about what sorts of supports need to be put in place. I mean, how bad is the lobster market going to get in the United States? I mean, are restaurants actually going to significantly reduce their purchase of lobsters, for example, table lobsters, fresh lobsters, or are they just going to pay the price, extra price, and continue on? Lots of questions about those kinds of things. So it would be good to have a sense. I'm sure the good folks in our public service have been doing that kind of analysis, either in the Executive Council office or in the Department of Opportunities New Brunswick or small business or wherever, to try as much as we can nail down what we can reasonably predict may happen, at least in the short term, and in what sectors. And then that can guide, as I said, further debate about what an appropriate response would be. And we don't have that yet, Madam Speaker. We really don't have that. So we need it, and that would add to the robust debate here. This is such a massive issue, Madam Speaker. I would go as far as to suggest that to continue a focus on this issue, on this threat that New Brunswick is facing and Canada is facing, that a select committee be established so that we can continue to explore and try and understand these issues as they develop, invite witnesses to come and speak to the legislature and to the population through the legislative committee to explain exactly what their experience has been to date. And this is a dynamic situation, so what their experience is as it changes and evolves. The more we can make the consequences of this, of these tariffs and other threats visible and comprehensible to ordinary New Brunswickers, that will take some of the fear away. That will take some of the stress and anxiety away. Not all, but at least, as usual, when you've got some light on a subject and a little bit of knowledge, then it seems a little less scary, a little less threatening. And that creates a context for New Brunswickers in terms of what government's response is, to this. So when the response lines up with what the actual concerns, to the extent that we can know them specifically and concretely and substantively, then that will help everyone. It was, we have lots of allies in New England and other parts of the United States, but New England in particular because of our historical relationship, Madam Speaker, with the Boston States. Not to digress, but I'll digress just for a minute. During the War of 1812, St. Stephen, during Independence Day in the United States, they had run out of gunpowder for their celebrations during the War of 1812. And so in St. Stephen, gunpowder was shared across the border to Caucus so they could carry off their explosive 4th of July celebrations. During the War of 1812, in fact, during the War of 1812, Madam Speaker, it got so frustrating for the governors of the New England states that they wrote to the President of the day to say, if you continue this war on Canada, we are considering seceding from this country. True, absolutely true, happened. Not the secession, but the letter, Madam Speaker. So we have strong allies there, which is why it was so important that the Premier met with the Governor of Massachusetts the other day. Obviously, we know Massachusetts depends extensively on refined petroleum products from New Brunswick, among other things, and the planes wouldn't get off the ground at Logan Airport without the aviation fuel from the refinery in St. John. So the Governor of Maine, Governor of Massachusetts, I expect the governors of the other New England states well understand what this means for them. And that's without even talking about what the counter-terrorists will mean for us that inevitably will come in greater quantity and at greater costs. Again, we need transparency around what government to this day knows how those counter-terrorists may affect New Brunswickers, so that we have all the information as a society that they have. Madam Speaker, it's like during the COVID pandemic. It was so important to share as much information with the public as possible to try and minimize the fear in those early days when there was a high level rate of death in the United States before the vaccines came, and hence the weekly updates by the Chief Medical Officer of Health and the Premier. So, Madam Speaker, it's critical that this legislature be able to continue its consideration on the floor of this House of the ongoing and developing situation with President Trump's stated intent to cause New Brunswick, Canada, probably he can't find New Brunswick on a map, but cause Canada economic harm, and thereby New Brunswick economic harm, for what he says to become the 51st state, or some other version of a society that is beholding to the United States and no longer independent. I mean, that's what he's on about. We know that. So it sounds surreal when we talk about it, and I think it's taken a long time for everyone to come to that point, because every time he says something new, it seems so surreal. Every new action he takes, it seems surreal, Madam Speaker. But Canadians are coming together on this. Already, people's decision to avoid buying U.S. products and purchasing Canadian products, purchasing New Brunswick products, has, according to media reports very recently, led to a 10% reduction in U.S. sales in Canada at the consumer level. And that is in a short period of time. So, Madam Speaker, we need to come together as parties as well, as members in this House around this issue, like we did around COVID. This is not an issue to use for partisan purposes. This is an issue that we must fight together. Of course, we're going to have disagreements about how best to address this, but, Madam Speaker, at the same time, it would again give New Brunswickers a greater sense of comfort if they knew that their elected representatives stood together for New Brunswickers against this extraordinary threat we are facing from the President of the United States. And I say the President of the United States, not the United States or Americans, because I know, and we know, there are many Americans, many governors, many state representatives and congresspeople who are friends of Canada. Thank you, Madam Speaker.